Welcome to episode 64 of Pop Kannon. We are your hosts. My name is Jordan.
I'm Robert.
I'm Sarah.
And I'm Joe.
Today's episode is a fan's choice episode, sort of. We ran a poll in our Facebook group, the Pop Kannon Collective, which you can join. Just search facebook.com/groups/Pop Kannon Collective. We gave 4 movies, all of which were streaming at the time. And
important to note.
The winning movie disappeared from streaming services. So therefore, we decided to run a secondary poll with the remaining 3 options, and the winner, Poltergeist. 1982. And Joe, I know you mentioned this earlier, you constantly think Steven Spielberg, because it's lauded as a Steven Spielberg film, but he did not direct it.
Right. He produced and wrote it.
He didn't, and he didn't direct it like in name only of not directing it. Like he was very present for the film.
Oh yeah, and you can feel his hand in the production. But
because wasn't this like it was the same around the same time as E.T. and when he was doing E.T. he wasn't allowed to direct
technically
anything.
Direct another thing. Yeah, contractually
so,
he wasn't allowed to technically direct something else. So
because like what I read was kind of like some people were like, yeah, he was like actually directing it, and other people were like, no, he wasn't. He was just, but
right.
If Steven Spielberg's involved, you probably just want to do what he says anyway.
Yeah, even then, you just kind of go like, okay, yeah, we'll just listen to him.
But the actual director, Tobe Hooper, did direct the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1 and 2.
And that's why Spielberg handpicked him to cover this, because he liked what he did with that.
So I have not ever actually sat down and watched this movie from start to finish. This was the first time for me.
Nice.
And I enjoyed it. I like horror movies, and this inspired so much, which we'll get into throughout the episode. But yeah, it was a lot of fun revisiting this. I've seen it in clips growing up. I've seen it in other materials growing up, and overall, I think this movie holds up in 2021 as a horror film. It's light horror, and that's okay. But overall, big fan of Poltergeist. Joe, what did you think?
It was a really good time. I think it's not so shocking like modern horror is. It's very much like what I would imagine a Spielberg horror movie to be, where it's like, it's kind of like a family movie until like there are times when it like goes there. I actually heard today that this movie was the reason for the PG-13 rating, or at least the originator. Probably like the biggest reason for that was the scene with the face peeling, which looked terrible by today's standards, but I'm sure in 1982, people probably shit their pants at that. And I don't think they show that scene on TV, or at least they didn't when I was a kid and I saw this. One of the other things that I really love about this is how fun the movie can be while like switching between the horror, because it really just makes you laugh at different times. Like Steve, Craig T. Nelson, is like so worried about his daughter, but he's also going through this routine to keep his boss from seeing the piano crawling across. So yeah, and even just like ending on a joke was a really fun thing after this whole like kind of exhausting event for this family. So yeah, I think it was a really fun horror movie, and horror is not really a genre that I'm usually into. So that's kind of saying something. It's definitely a film of its time, not in that it's like problematic, but just that like, the effects are very early. They were trying to do things that like would eventually lead to what we know today, but it just definitely is pretty jarring looking back. Yeah, that's a really long rambling thing. Sarah, what did you think?
So I do like horror movies, and I do watch them quite frequently, but I actually don't think I've ever seen this. It's one of those things where I feel like it's so ingrained in pop culture that you kind of just assume that you've seen it. Because that's happened to me before, where it's like, something's always on TV, so you pick it up. But like I've never seen this before. I didn't really even know what it was about. I feel like I've heard more of the things that happened like on the set or after the movie, like the things like which I'm sure we'll talk about later, like the curse. Like I've heard all that stuff before. So I felt like I've watched the movie, but in reality, this was my first time, and I really enjoyed it. It definitely felt like a Spielberg film. Like the opening scene, I was like, I kind of feel like I'm watching E.T. or something right now, just that kind of suburban, idyllic subdivision. But no, it was really good. It didn't feel that aged, even though the movie's technically 10 years older than me. But no, I'm a little disappointed that we couldn't do the first poll, but I'm glad that this was the runner-up.
Yeah.
Robert, what do you have to say? We're dying to hear.
I've seen, so unlike you guys, I've seen this movie several times in the past, and it wasn't until probably a few years ago that I watched it the first time, but it's been basically yearly since then. I think it's such an effective movie, and I think so many of the things that happen are like Joe was saying, kind of like laying the groundwork for where we get to now, and we don't get some of the stuff that we have without it. Just the way that they ease you into like the comfort, and then they slowly pull that back from you, and they do things that are jarring. There's jump scares, like there's everything is in this without it being so over the top that you don't feel comfortable ever watching it again. Like that's why I think I enjoy this. And Joe mentioned the face ripping scene as well, and those are Steven Spielberg's hands pulling the face apart. But yeah, it's really funny to like that hard cut from the sink back up into the mirror, and it's obviously a dummy. But that's where I think the bad effects kind of end in this, because everything else is like kind of checks out and is creepy enough to seem like it could be another dimension or some shit like that. Like I don't hate any of the other effect work in this at all, and the performances aren't bad. Like Craig T. Nelson is like yeah, I laugh, but it's because I know like in the future he does all of this other stuff, and I'm like, oh, that's the guy. But no, I really enjoy Poltergeist, and I'm also very glad that it won our secondary track tournament because I do like this movie, so getting it in on my yearly watch while also getting to talk about it is fun.
So going off of the effects you mentioned, I don't think they're bad necessarily. No. I think it's a product of the time. In the 80s, I'm sure when that face was peeling, people were losing their minds.
Yeah.
Even just like looking at it from like a eeriness or creepy vibe, because the movie itself isn't necessarily scary.
No.
But it's definitely unsettling. And I think it does a really good job of that. And that's because they leaned into the comfort in the beginning. Yeah. They leaned into that family aspect, which really worked. And the family felt like an actual unit.
Yeah.
Everyone was believable in their roles. Craig T. Nelson as the dad, fantastic. JoBeth Williams as Diane, she was great as well. Carrying her performance where she has to scream into nothingness. She doesn't have a tennis ball to look at,
right,
and react to. So overall, I thought the performances were really good, and the effects don't bother me in any way.
Yeah, the performances were all great, and even the kid that played Robbie, that moment when they first hear Carol Ann in the TV, that little stutter, that brought me back to being a kid, and when you're just frozen scared and you can't get words out. The fact that kid was able to bring that performance at that young age, when otherwise he was just a scared little kid, and I was like, okay, this kid's he's gonna get eaten by a tree.
My favorite thing that Robbie does is get into the taxi cab.
He looks back like he's leaving on his own volition.
Yeah.
And just the way that like I want it in a GIF to use it as a reaction to everything. It's because he just like swings open the door and throws his fucking bag in there and looks back at the house. Like, it's just so funny. Every time I watch it, I laugh so hard at just that moment because it's perfect.
One, like, just kind of going back off of like what we already touched on about like the family dynamic and just how like the cast just like worked so well together. I think that's kind of another example of how this film has kind of been monumental in subsequent horror genres, because like if you think about like The Conjuring, like Amityville, like those types of things, so many of like our favorite horror films center in like a household. Even like my favorite season of American Horror Story, it's always going to be Murder House, because I think when you have a group of actors and actresses who operate so well as a family unit and who are portraying these like kind of horrors, it makes you feel for it more, because again, it's like you can relate to the characters. And even like the older sister Dana, she's not really in it. Like, she's really not that big of like a part of this, except for a couple little I guess more so funny parts, like when the construction workers are like catcalling her, which was really creepy and unsettling for me.
But it's fine because they could just lean in through the window and take coffee.
Her mom thought it was funny.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? It was like, my mom would not think that's funny. I don't think that's funny. And that's how you know when you're old. Yeah. Everything just worked well.
Yeah.
Just like one more thing about like the effects. I do love all the practical effects in this. Like, I think if they had edited the face thing a little better, or even added like a part with still just like a prosthetic and before cutting to the dummy, that would have played better. But like all the like the stuff on the door and like the like Jello shit that's all over them when they come out, that all really worked for me. I think like what was most jarring was like the 3D, which, like, to be fair, didn't really start to look good until like Jurassic Park, which was like 10 years after this. But that, I mean, that shows that like Spielberg was like thinking about this. Sorry, Toby Hooper, but we're going to talk about Spielberg.
Yeah.
He's dead anyway.
R.I.P.
But Spielberg was like thinking about this stuff that early on. He was like, this is going to be really good, even if it doesn't look great now. Like, and I'm sure it still looked good to people then. But like, it's just very cheesy to see like, you know, the record spin in front of the screen and the compass starts playing it. Instead of the animated stuff, the more like blended stuff, like that creepy,
that monster in front of the door.
Yeah, when it comes down the stairs. The monster in front of the door is wild, and actually like a scary moment in the scene. Even though
it's
like I'm not gonna like worry
ethereal
about that
and weird and scary and just.
But like those like kind of like wispy tentacle things coming down the stairs, and then even like the orbs with like the people behind them. Yep. I thought that worked really well. I thought that was a really good mix of practical and digital for like an early kind of special effects of that.
In the kitchen with the chairs. The chair pyramid was practical. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they did that in one take where they pull the camera away and like people come in and stack them up real quick and then run away and then they cut the camera back. And it was like a total of 7 seconds, I think, that clip. But so it was like really get in there, get out, and it looks like, what the fuck? Because it's so jarring when the fucking chairs are up on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's no cuts and it's perfect.
Speaking of that scene, when I was watching it, like, I immediately recognized seeing that scene as a kid, and like it immediately brings me back, and I'm like, oh, I've seen this on TV. I remember being like nervous watching that.
Yeah.
And I felt like Diane played that scene off really well, because it was just this nervous energy that she had throughout that entire section.
Yeah, because when the chairs are pulled away from the table, she's like, all right, you guys.
Yeah.
Stop fucking with me. Yeah. And then she turns around and is like...
Well, and then like the energy has like a total shift then when like the chairs are moving. Then she's like, let's send the kid.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, she's like swinging back and forth between like nervous and excited, and she's not sure which one to settle in until her daughter's gone.
And then home. Bad stuff.
That's such a fucking wild... like, what happens to them leading... Like, the fucking tree eats their son, essentially.
Mm-hmm. and then
just
gets sucked
terrifying.
away.
And then meanwhile they're outside fucking dealing with the sun bullshit. And then the daughter just disappears. They had no idea.
I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like they built sets that spun. Like
Yes.
uh,
The scene where Diane is, I don't know, getting
Going up
sexually
the
assaulted
wall
by the
and up
ghost.
the
Yeah.
ceiling.
That is a spinning set, and they just have the camera fixed.
But even when the daughter gets sucked into the closet, I think that's how they did that too. They just
Yeah.
let the toys tumble down the room and just
Yeah.
had like a fake girl hanging on the bed.
Yeah, because I know I read that the actress, they only did one take of her like holding on to the headboard because she was like terrified of it.
Yeah. I
So
bet.
when later on when it comes back and the Robbie and Carol Ann are both being like pulled into the closet again, and when mom comes in afterward, it's obviously just a dummy because she doesn't move, and it's just like I did notice that after I read the thing, I like watched that scene had like come up, and I was like, oh shit, yeah, she's definitely not there. But then it cuts to them like running into the hallway after the fact, so like they definitely used a dummy for her in some of that. But it looked, I think it looked awesome. It was so fucking like unsettling and weird, and like when you're a kid, your closet is like the scariest fucking place.
And to go off that, the way that they utilized the lights was so cool. And it was really jarring and unsettling and made you feel like there's something otherworldly in this room.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with everything except for when they use the strobe light when the static is on the TV. One, it's like awful to look at, and two, it's like obviously not coming from the TV. It's all above them, like directly over their head. And I hated the strobe light so much. And I'm sure it gave like so many people seizures.
That was my first thought when I was watching it. Like you need.
Although
like,
I
a
will
seizure
say,
warning.
when it cut to Carol Ann watching the TV, and then she slowly smiled, I was like, that's the scariest thing in this movie.
Why do you think so many horror movies have kids in them? What's more terrifying than children?
We talked about this.
Trees and clowns that are possessed.
Oh,
on
well,
your
can we
chair.
please talk about why does every single like horror film with kids need to have a fucking creepy clown doll? Because as soon as you see it, you know it's gonna come to life.
Don't all kids love clowns?
No.
Every child loves clowns.
I think that horror movies manufactured the fear of clowns in kids, though. I think kids used to like clowns, and then Hollywood used them against kids, and now kids don't like clowns anymore.
But I don't think like any kids have liked clowns since like the 50s.
Yeah.
Like, I think that was like.
It's interesting that the clown was so heavily featured in this film, and like Robbie was scared of it just sitting there in general. So like, why did he have it to begin with?
Well, but like exactly, like that was my thought. It's like,
well, I think
why
it was
do
Carol
we need
Ann's.
it like staring at him in bed though? Like,
it wasn't a very big room. I mean,
no, like also they're in such a nice development, and the boy and the girl have to share a bedroom. Like, what is this?
The house was set up very strangely.
Is that like 80s architecture?
Probably. Well, so that's
they were
one
very
of my,
liberal with their construction.
That's one of my like favorite things about it is how like the subtext of this movie is so like anti-corporate greed and anti-materialism, and like there's so much of that baked into this where if you don't look for subtext, you're just watching a horror movie. But like all of the stuff with him and his boss, and
the fact that the family itself is so progressive as well.
Yes.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know too many parents of the 80s who are just going to be sitting in bed smoking weed.
The parents keep their weed in a cigar box.
Right.
Yeah.
And then she gives her daughter a cigar box to bury the bird, and she says the bird doesn't like the smell.
Yeah.
And like also, don't flush a bird down a toilet. That's
Yeah.
like one way to get
Right?
clogged pipes.
Ruin your plumbing.
That's how you get a poltergeist, you guys.
If there's one thing you can take away from this movie, it's that you don't flush a bird down the toilet.
kind of was just waiting for the bird to come back to life, not gonna lie.
The architecture of the house was so strange.
Yeah.
And like having that open staircase in the middle of the floor was weird. Because,
Well,
like,
I think
you
that
have
was
young kids.
a thing. Like, it was the same thing like when spiral staircases became like really big, like not practical for families and children at all, but it was like
They're so cool, and we could have so many of them.
Yeah.
And then they have like most of the rooms are like sunken. You have to go down like 2 steps to get to everything.
Conversation pits or whatever.
Yeah.
Like that was a
and I'm
thing.
sitting
It's
here like,
weird.
man, I love the design of that house.
It almost makes me wonder if they built the house strictly for the purposes of like, okay, we need a camera to fit down this hallway.
Yeah. I know that the house that they filmed it in is an actual structure. It's like a real house.
Oh.
But I don't know that they filmed it inside the exterior that they used. You know what I mean?
Right.
But the exterior house is a real place that you can go to in California somewhere.
But even like plot lines like with the structure, I mean, like the cemetery up on the hill, like where he wants to continue
new
building.
development,
It's like,
yeah.
that's phase 5. And you could have phase 5, which is like your master bedroom can look at all these other houses.
Yeah, and he goes like, well, what about the people in the valley? And he's like, but you're not a valley person anymore.
You're gonna
You're a
look
hill man.
down upon the peasants, but you're a peasant right now.
Because he was showing phase 4 and it was the exact layout of his house. But I think it was like, that was the scheme, like fill the valley with like chumps and then start selling to like richer people up on the hill.
Yeah.
So yeah, like phase 5 I think was going to be different. Like as he said, I love that subtext too, and I think that was all intentional for Steve's storyline, because he's kind of offered that choice when he's like already like on the brink of like losing his daughter and losing everything. He's just like, but you could have more money and you can have a better house up here. And he has to then make the decision like, am I gonna, be fully corrupted, or am I gonna go this other way? It's that contradiction of him like laying in bed smoking weed while reading a Reagan book, and it's like, that's not a very Reagan thing to do. And then the line when his wife is trying to show him what's going on, and she says, try to be a little more open-minded like you used to be. So like he's changing as a person. He's on a path to like this corrupted capitalist pig or whatever the hell.
He's the reason for 42% of all the sales of those houses.
Exactly. He's gonna be a shitty realtor guy, and then he makes his choice for good, and like it probably saves his life, but he ends up with nothing,
and
besides his family,
his kids for the most part,
Right, he literally ends up with nothing. The house goes away, like all of their possessions are gone.
That's like when Robert said that you could go visit the house. I was like, you can? Didn't it just like disappear into a portal to hell?
They like sectioned that part of the block off, and you could just go look at the hole that the house was in. No, that was done with a miniature. That was done with a 4-foot miniature that they folded in on itself.
Oh, that's cool.
That's cool.
That was like a practical shot?
It was a miniature.
Wow. That's cool.
And Spielberg was working on this in post and E.T. at the same time at ILM. So like he had the best people that could possibly do shit. And I mean, ILM is notorious for their miniature shit, so because of Star Wars and all that. That was like right in the thick of all of that happening as well. So, and that's why all that Star Wars merch in Robbie's room is just like the coolest fucking thing ever.
Yeah, but I think that like feeds into the like that subtext though of like consumerism and like all we ever see them eat is like Eggo waffles, and like, what about dinner, Mom? Oh, we'll go to Pizza Hut. Like all that stuff is there, and it's just like, this is America in the 80s, and that's real. But, like, and also like all the Star Wars shit, that's what a kid's bedroom would look like in the 80s. So.
And I was gonna make it the parents in the early 80s, when this is supposed to, this is when it was filmed and supposedly taking place, I would assume. They have their own TV in their bedroom. And at that point, that was not very heard of for your parents to have their own TV that they hang out and watch. That was like the living room was the place that you did that, and the bedroom was where you slept. There was none of that kind of crossover shit. So the fact that they even had that in their bedroom just goes to show like the level of class that they were attaining because of his sales and shit.
And they had one in the kitchen.
Yes, a little TV in the kitchen, which is just another step in the, like, these people were super affluent because of his sales, which created part of the conscious crisis that he has on top of his daughter disappearing, which is why he looks like shit halfway through this movie. I think part of it was, like, supposed to seem as though it was like killing his soul to have to know some of this information. You know what I mean? It was really fucking like weighing on him.
But it's also telling that like right after that scene, when he finds out that they moved the cemetery, is when they first bring in Tangina, the short, scary lady. And he's very skeptical of her despite everything he's already seen.
Yes.
So he's like thinking like, well, maybe I can go back. Maybe I can just like make everything normal again and just keep going on my life and like get that new house and everything will be fine because I won't be in this house anymore. Yeah. But then she like proves herself and he's immediately like, fuck.
Dude, when he's holding on to the rope in the portal, she says, okay, now run to the light. He's like, wait a second.
Yeah, they go back and forth about the light so much.
But it's just so funny. It's just so funny to me because he's like not in any position to argue about anything. You know what I mean? But he still has to like try to mansplain what he knows about the light.
And then he drops the rope anyway.
Yeah. Well, in her defense, she wasn't talking to him.
Right.
She wasn't talking to
not
his
even to Carol
family.
Ann. She was talking to all the spirits, but
exactly. She was telling them to go towards the light.
Right. And he was like, wait a second.
Subsequently Star-Lorded it.
Yeah.
So,
yes.
Well, he didn't. I mean, everything worked out. Can we talk about what the rules are of the Poltergeist, though? Because first, like, we get Dr. Lesh telling Robbie, like, the story about, like, that ends up being, like, more or less true about, like, oh, there's a light, and if you go into the light, then you're one with everything, and you get to know everything, and you're at peace. But, like, some people just aren't ready to do that. And Tangina more or less gives us the same kind of thing. But if these people were, like, buried and happily dead for a while, wouldn't they already be on the other side and at peace? Like, what about like disturbing their grave would rip them away from that? And like, I'm nitpicking on a movie from 30 years ago.
We're gonna have to like cross over with
40
some
years
sort
ago.
of
Fuck. I'm
podcast that covers those things, and we're gonna have to talk to our supernatural podcast friends.
Do we have
and
that?
see what they think about that? 'Cause that's like a really deep fucking question, Joe. Yeah. Jesus Christ.
That's the shit that I think about, though. I'm like, okay, but like, why aren't these people at peace then?
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know that anybody that was buried underneath the house was the reason for it happening, but I think it was just like more of a vengeful spirit situation, like saying this is not okay. In a way to like get them out of there. I don't know that it was like one of the people that was dead in the bottom of the pool.
Yeah.
Like,
and was she just saying the beast, or was it supposed to be Satan, or just like some demon?
I think it's just some demon. And in my opinion, I think maybe the Poltergeist was one of those. And because being buried under there and getting your grave desecrated, like, it just grew that anger more and became more dangerous and vengeful until she was able to fully open that portal and it came through. And that's when it became like most powerful and started like pulling those bodies up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I do also think it's weird that, like, I don't know, the guy that dug that pool, man, how did he miss like 8 skeletons?
Lots of alcohol? I don't know.
Maybe lots of alcohol. I think maybe those guys like always worked with that developer, so they knew like the status quo.
Yeah.
They're like, you're gonna find some stuff, just like be quiet about it.
You know what, guys? It's organic fertilizer. It's fine.
That's true.
Your
That's
garden
true.
is gonna be. Mwah.
Well, I mean, it depends when they were buried. If they were embalmed, they're not gonna break down.
No.
Well,
like
yeah, it would depend on how. I mean, it would depend on how old the cemetery was. I would assume pre-embalming.
Yeah.
Now, but are the people that are buried underneath the tree the reason that the tree was possessed and tried to kill the kid?
Maybe.
Are they part of the roots of the tree?
Maybe it was a whomping willow.
I think so, because they try to show you that there's like a human face kind of knot in the beginning when he's looking out the window at it.
Yeah.
What's scarier, trees or clowns?
Fucking clowns, man.
Dude, if you had a fear of trees, you'd be fucking screwed.
Well, no, Steven Spielberg was inspired by his fear of clowns and trees, apparently.
Well, when he was a kid, he had a tree like that outside of his window, and he was always scared that
Creepy.
could happen to him. Yeah, it's one of those things that I always did when I was a kid, was like when you'd see a pile of things on a chair in your room or something.
Dude, I still do that.
You make out a face on it, and then you just stare at it for fucking ever,
Well,
waiting for it to move.
Well, I was just going to say that it's really fucking fitting then, because Steven Spielberg ruined my childhood with my fear of E.T. So I would E.T. lived in the basement of my parents' old house, and I wouldn't go down there at night.
Oh my god.
Scariest movie.
She's like more scared of E.T. than the fucking Poltergeist.
Dude, legit, I won't watch E.T. My dad made me watch it once because he knew I was afraid of it.
She spills her Reese's Pieces.
I can't look at Drew Barrymore.
Yeah, Tangina was really good in this movie, and I love her in Scariest Places on Earth. She's got
Zelda
like the
Rubinstein.
scariest voice.
Scariest
That-
voices on earth.
It'll like haunt me for the rest of my life. So seeing her in a live action thing that I do remember seeing her in as a kid, because she was another thing that stuck out to me.
You can't forget her face once you've seen her in this.
Or her voice. Like, because I brought this up earlier, like, I hadn't seen her in this, but as soon as she came on the screen, I was like, what do I know her from? It was like an immediate thing. But, like, just because she's so distinct, and I don't think she could play anything other than, like, a witchy woman.
My favorite is when she stands at the top of the steps and pretends to not hear him and then cuts him off when he thinks he's whispering.
Because he wants to prove her wrong with, she could read my mind.
It's so fucking funny. Because as soon as she says, well, talk to her, and he's just going like, I'm like, oh my God, what a fucking asshole. Because I'm immediately like, dude, that's exactly what the fuck I would do.
So we talked earlier about how this movie inspired a lot of things, including being parodied. And we've all said we've seen this movie in Family Guy.
Yeah.
I haven't, but that's fine.
Really?
Yeah, I don't watch Family Guy.
I don't anymore, but
I don't know that I've seen the episode you're talking about.
No,
but-
I
Really?
didn't actually even know that there was like I looked it up earlier, but like Petergeist or something.
yeah.
I didn't even know that
They
was a
spoofed
thing.
the whole thing.
Okay, first,
Yeah.
all right. I'll go through my whole spiel. Family Guy, because I've seen that episode so many times. I don't watch Family Guy anymore, but I'm a white guy in my 30s, so like that's all I did for 4 years of high school. The plot point of that is that Peter's house was built on an Indian burial ground. And I've seen that so many times that replaced the actual plot of this movie in my head, that I thought this movie had that racist plot point in it. And they do like sideways mention it when they're at the cemetery, but they're like, no, we're not doing that. I was like, oh fuck, like all my assumptions about this movie are gone because of that. But it does have some very funny moments, like Peter looking in the mirror and peeling his face away to reveal Hank Hill underneath. And he says propane in the mirror, and that's the joke.
Like Joe, I've seen a bunch, so seeing the parallels there is fun. But then also Scary Movie 2 had the part where Wendy went up on the wall and stuff, and they shot it
to say the least.
And my favorite thing that they did from this to Scary Movie 2 was in this, Mom is wearing a football jersey that is 65. And in Scary Movie 2, Tori Spelling is wearing a 69 jersey, which just is like it's almost as if Steven Spielberg just set that one up to get knocked down in the future. You know what I mean?
He was like, I'm gonna give you a breadcrumb for later.
Could have been any number, because if she's wearing number 14 in this film, in Scary Movie 2, putting 69 on the jersey, not as funny.
Yeah.
But there's a moment in Scary Movie 2 where you go like, was she wearing 69 in Poltergeist? That would be so weird. I know South Park did an episode where they don't use Zelda Rubinstein as a person. They use her character from this. Like, she comes in as this character into an episode of South Park to talk to celebrity ghosts who won't go away. It's the whole thing.
Oh my God.
Billy Mays, Farrah Fawcett, and Michael Jackson had all died around the same time, and South Park used that as the genesis for an episode where they used her likeness and somebody doing a voice that sounds really good. I mean, they did remake this in 2015.
Which was going to be another question that I had, too, which was like, I've never seen the 2015 one, obviously, but I'm kind of interested to see it now.
To see how it would look?
How different it would be.
I've seen it, and I don't remember it very well, but I don't remember liking it. I don't think it was very good. And they also, they marketed it with the clown. Like, if you look it up, the clown.
I'm not watching it.
The clown is the poster, and I think the clown comes up a lot more than it did in this.
I know that I've seen it, but I straight up don't remember it.
Yeah. I do think that a lot of stuff does work in this. I feel like the editing could have been better at parts. The biggest thing to me, I don't know if they like lost footage or something, but when they first show the chair sliding across the kitchen and he's like slumped against the wall, like taking it all in, that really hard cut to them outside the neighbor's house. Just like,
I noticed that.
Yes.
It was weird and jarring.
The one where they knock on the neighbor's door and they can't really explain themselves.
Yeah.
So there was apparently, I literally read this before we started recording. The scene continues, and Craig T. Nelson makes a lot of, I guess, disparaging comments about Pizza Hut.
Good.
And I don't know if Pizza Hut was like a sponsor for the movie or something like that, but they had like a very negative reaction to it, and they fucking just chopped it out of the film.
That's so funny. Oh my God.
The power of sponsors.
Yeah, seriously? That's why it's such a hard cut. Because you mentioned that they said Pizza Hut earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, they did.
And that, to me, means that they were trying to bring it up again to kind of hit home like, oh, Pizza Hut, Pizza Hut, Pizza Hut, remember? And he says something like, I hate Pizza Hut. Like, I think it was part of him, like, losing his shit about where he was at that point.
Yeah.
So he probably was like, I can't stand having Pizza Hut again, or some fucking shit like that. And they were like, oh, well, we don't like that, actually.
Everybody
that
likes
out of the
Pizza
movie.
Hut.
We have stuffed crust. What does he not understand? Book it. You know what I mean? No.
But yeah, there were other parts where like the editing just seemed like a little uneven to me.
Like, it's such a product of the 80s, like that the dads want to have their neighbors move their TVs from the spots in their houses because the remotes counteract one another. Because, like, that's a thing.
Yeah, but I was also like,
just
fucking change the channel on the set. Like, you're standing in front of it.
Yeah.
What
like,
the
why
fuck
do you have to have
this remote for, Joe?
Why do you have to have this dick measuring contest with your clicker?
They're fucking changing each other's channels. Standing at the door.
Yeah, and the movie is way funnier than I was expecting.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. So, like,
fucking Spielberg.
Yeah.
when you think of the movie Poltergeist, immediately you think, okay, ghosts. Like, the name elicits a horror response, right? But then the last shot of the movie is him pushing the TV out.
Yeah.
And then it's this long crane shot away into the end credits.
Every single time I watch this movie, I always make the same comment because I don't remember that I said it the last time. But I always think it'd be funny if we got a cut into the hotel and the TV was in the same place, like Fred Flintstone putting the saber-toothed tiger out with the milk, and then he turns around and the fucking TV's back in the apartment. I just think that'd be funny as shit. But every single time I see it, I'm like, that's like hilarious that he does that. And it's like the look on his face. He's like, nope, not even gonna fucking risk it. TV's out. Which is part of more of the subtext where he completely rejects that lifestyle to the point that he doesn't even want a TV in the room.
Right. Like
anymore.
He's fucking moving to the woods.
Yeah.
Survivalist.
They're gonna be like young Earth Christians and shit in like a week. So
I loved all the like unspoken comedic moments too. Like even like the very beginning when the mom's about to drop the bird in the toilet and the kid just walks in, like it's just perfect. And like that's like a point where like the editing was good because they just cut away. Like there's nothing more to do there.
Right. The joke is you saw it. We're good.
Yeah.
Well, because even she makes that comment about like, why couldn't it have happened? Like, why couldn't the bird have died on a school day? Because mom's just gonna probably go out to the store and buy another bird.
Yeah.
Or say, oh, he ran away.
Yeah. Exactly.
He went to school.
And a nice touch to immediately after they bury the bird, the pool guys dig it back up again.
Dig it up.
Yes, instantly.
Which is like
you see it
emblematic of the whole plot of the movie. It's like, oh, that's great.
Yeah. There's little details like that make this movie so incredibly cool because it's those little details that matter, and you'll pick them up more and more on a second and third and fourth rewatch.
What's a moment from this that like when you saw it in passing as a kid always, like when you thought of this movie you thought of that thing that you saw?
They're here.
Was there like
that's the only part I knew because I'd never seen it before. But like that's like one of the things where it's like even though I've never seen it, it's like one of those things where it's like you always see that scene. So it's like I felt like I already knew what that scene was about. And even, I mean, I've caught myself saying, like, they're here.
Yeah.
Somebody
like
comes, like, to the dogs. They're here.
I think as a kid, it was probably the flashing lights. Like, I don't know. For some reason, that always, like, stuck with me.
I think the number one thing I always remember is the last time you see the portal when it's that like fleshy tunnel instead of the closet. And like before the door gets ripped in, like that like creepy fleshy shit that's like coming out the cracks. It's physically disgusting and it's like a practical effect. So yeah, that always like is like in my memory when I picture this movie.
For me, it's them covered in like whatever gelatinous membrane in the bathtub.
Yeah.
Anytime that I caught pieces of this when I was younger, it always wound up being then. So I always remember that lady with her kid in the fucking bathtub covered in pink goo, and it always just like made me like, but like I know they came from like another dimension or whatever, but like where did they come from? That they're covered in viscera, okay? Like there's no other word.
Goo was in Ghostbusters too, so
yeah, I thought it was ectoplasm, but
that's what it's called. I couldn't remember what it was called.
Yeah.
Ghost turns.
We're gonna have a glossary at the end that's just gonna scroll up the screen.
That'd be fun. But they never name it either. It's pretty well.
Yeah, do your vocab. Pink goo.
Pink goo.
But yeah, that was always what stuck with me was the ghost at the door, that spooky fucking googly looking puppet ghost that they did, and then the pink goo in the bathtub, because it just always made me have way more questions than answers, because everyone's like they're back, but I'm like, but where were they exactly to get covered in that? Because I never want to be there.
I also get a kick out of the guy. This isn't really it is like a big moment because of like the maggots that come out of the meat and everything, but I like the impetus that he's like, I'm gonna fry somebody else's steak at 3 a.m. But like when it starts crawling across the counter, that's such a classic scene, and then like spitting out the chicken wing because it's got maggots on it,
dude. every time.
No, thank you. It's
also such a Spielberg movie because like nobody actually dies. besides
Right.
the
There's,
people who
like-
are already dead.
Yeah.
Like you would think that like any like other horror movie, they'd be like ticking people off as they went.
Yeah.
No, but everybody survives, but it's just like so fucking traumatic.
Yeah.
It's not
At
about
what
dying.
cost?
It's about the trauma. It's about living with that now.
Yeah. Lots
the
of
scary
therapy, but they won't get it because it's the 80s. So
It's the 80s. So dad's just going to drink a lot.
Well-
and get
PTSD.
bitter.
That's the other thing. They say, wow, she doesn't even remember anything. I'm like, yeah, because it's trauma. She'll remember it when she's 40.
She's going to go hang her daughter's dress in her closet. And she's going to be like, I just had a dream that the closet was this fleshy tunnel. And her husband's like,
Robbie like doesn't even keep house plants in his house. He has like a really like brutalist concrete structure of a house. He's like, nothing with stuffing, no trees, no plants. This is my life.
There's no closets either.
No closets.
There's no closets. And nothing's allowed to even remotely resemble a face in any light.
No TVs.
But yeah, Poltergeist is good, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a good time. I'll
too.
probably wind up adding this movie to my my usual Halloween
Cool.
Yeah.
spooky season rewatch.
I'm glad.
I'd
I'm glad
rewatch
that
this.
I'm glad that you guys liked it, man.
Yeah.
That's fun.
So if you guys have a movie that you would like us to see and review possibly, join our Facebook group because you'll have a chance to vote for things like that in the future.
As long as it's, streaming.
As long as it's streaming and we could all freely access it.
Yes.
Which we do so
The
that you
asterisk.
can also freely access it.
Right. That's, the point isn't so much that we don't want to get the film. It's that you wouldn't be able to watch it if you wanted to listen to us before or after you watched it.
I mean, I bought this on Blu-ray because physical media.
Nobody has AMC Plus.
No. And that's,
Like-
dude, that's twice AMC Plus has fucked us, man, and I'm really mad about it.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll get to Scream. We'll get
No,
to
I
everything
thought you were going to
else.
say we'll get our revenge. I was like, yeah, we will. AMC Plus.
We'll have our revenge.
You'll rue the day, AMC Plus.
On that note, let us know what you guys thought about Poltergeist. Have you ever seen it? What did you think? As always, you could find us on social media and interact with us at Pop Kannon. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
And you could subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. We have a link tree in all of our bios on all of our social medias. Click that link and pick one.
And if you're not afraid of screens after this, you can also find us on YouTube, where you can like and subscribe to catch all of our videos where, seeing is believing.
I love it. That's our new
That AMC
catchphrase.
is going to make us edit out that joke about that. Just like
And then
Pizza
there's going to
Hut.
be a big chunk missing.
Yeah, it's going to just hard cut to the end of the episode.
Make sure to join that Facebook group like Jordan said, and if you are on Twitter or Instagram inclined, I am Joe for Broke there.
You can find me on Instagram only at Sarah Ann Divity.
I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Yesball.
And I am on Instagram and Twitter at JL24FPS. So thank you so much for watching and or listening. We'll see you on the very next episode. It's still spooky season. It's October. We have some more tricks up our sleeves. Unless they're a treat.
Oh,
But it might be a trick.
He did the thing.
I don't know.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah. I don't know. For Pop Kannon, we're your hosts. My name is Jordan.
I'm Robert.
Still Sarah.
I'm Joe.
And we'll see you on the next one.